So our next guest, Dima Azarenko, is a crypto developer, product manager, and entrepreneur. He's developed software, NFTs, protocols, and started his own company. He gives us unique insight into a wide variety of topics, including some of the aspects of developing crypto and how it's different from developing traditional software, some of the security aspects of developing crypto, and some of the security breaches in the crypto space. One thing he talks about that many people probably don't think about is the upside of the crypto bubble bursting. He also talks about some of the use cases for NFTs, cryptocurrency, and gives a couple of unique use cases that we probably don't think about a lot in the USA and in the West. He also gives us a couple hot takes on the collapse of FTX, the collapse of the Terra Luna ecosystem, some of the mysterious deaths surrounding crypto billionaires, among a few other things.
You can also find this interview on our technical channel, Real Time Cyber. If you're a technical-minded person, I suggest checking out that channel.
Before we jump into it, you've probably noticed that there's been a lot of cryptocurrency exchanges collapsing and people have been losing money. You've probably also heard about Coinbase's terms of service, which basically state that if they go bankrupt, your cryptocurrency is not protected, you could lose it all. So you probably come to the conclusion it's not very safe to keep your crypto in one of those exchanges. But on the other hand, putting on your computer into a desktop wallet has some risks too. You've probably heard about some of the cryptocurrency stealing malwares, which we've analyzed on our YouTube channel. That's why we're promoting Ledger. Ledger is basically a decentralized hardware wallet. Basically works like a flash drive where you can put all your cryptocurrency onto that wallet and know that it's safe. If you're interested in securing your crypto or know somebody is, we ask that you do it through our link, which helps us provide these podcast episodes and videos. If you're interested in following Dima Azarenko for more insights, we put the link to his company and his Twitter in the description. We hope you enjoy the interview. Let's jump in. So Dima, thanks for coming on.
Of course.
So way to get started.
Happy
Tell
to
us a
be
little
on.
about yourself.
So I'm Dima Azarenko. I'm the co-founder of PIA. I'm head of product at FlickPlay, and also co-founder at Armada Labs. In the past few years, I've co-founded a crypto protocol, which then transitioned to Armada Labs. Also co-founded a data company, which transitioned into our crypto protocol. And the past 10 years, I've been a tech entrepreneur, started a software development company, was top 10 Illinois software development companies. And that kind of transitioned for me being kind of in the startup world and starting a bunch of different startups in different fields.
Okay, cool. It looks like you've done some engineering of different cryptocurrencies and protocols. I think for our audience, I'd say we kind of a mix. Most are, say, pretty technically savvy and some probably not quite as much. But give us a little rundown of what are the major differences between engineering like traditional software as well as engineering cryptocurrency or some of the different protocols and wallets?
Yeah, so when I entered and we started Swap Protocol, I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced, there's a lot of R&D involved because the space is so new that there's really no use cases to look at, right? So as you're building out the protocol, you're discovering things every single day that you didn't know before. Like when we did our IDO, we had no idea how to do an IDO. And we basically took a model from Wise Token that we thought was a good tokenomic model that's going to work for us. And we simulated that in our environment. But the one thing that I think we underestimated when we were building out our protocol was just the fact that all of these smart contracts are immutable, and decisions that you make early on are going to affect the success of your protocol later on. And I'll give a primary example here. So the one thing, when we launched our IDO, we did have bugs. So we basically did like a 30-day raise. So every single day, a certain amount of people would contribute ETH. And then that would get divided by your weight in that day. And then the total amount of cryptocurrency or swap tokens would get distributed at the end of 30 days for that specific day, right? So there was a bug that came out there and we kind of had to fix that. Luckily, it wasn't, a smart contract issue. We kind of were able to reimburse customers for what they put in. But the other kind of major thing that we did that ended up being a mistake, when you launch a cryptocurrency on Ethereum or on any other chain into a DEX, right? You launch it as a paired cryptocurrency with ETH or with another token. And when we raised that amount, I think we raised at the time roughly, I think the 200,000 or 220,000. We paired our cryptocurrency with ETH. And we actually ended up being the #1 trending token on CoinGecko and on CoinMarketCap. So it was a pretty exciting 2 days when we went literally from nothing to, $100 million market cap token, and basically overnight. I was like, okay, this is insane. What kind of industry are we in? Like, never thought that this could happen. But one thing that we did, we kind of took a model from Wise Token, where we're going to burn our LP tokens. And what LP tokens are, they're your liquidity pool tokens. And they give you access to the liquidity that's inside your DEX in your liquidity pool. And when we did that, Uniswap was Uniswap V2 at the time. We burned these tokens, and then a month later, Uniswap V3 came out. They had a bunch of new features where you can have dynamic fees on there for your liquidity providers, and other cool features that we could have used within our protocol. But because our LP tokens were burned, we had no way of actually extracting that liquidity and moving it to Uniswap V3, which in the case, like, it's immutable, and that's fantastic, but you really have to consider those challenges when building out these protocols, because you make one mistake, like you can make upgradable smart contracts, which are called proxies. However, at the end of the day, a proxy doesn't mean you can upgrade the smart contract entirely. And that's kind of like the challenge that we faced initially, with many more to come, due to the fact of immutability.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that seems like, when you look at a lot of different software engineering going out there and some of the critical vulnerabilities that are discovered, it seems very similar to kind of what happens in some of these protocols and cryptocurrencies, especially like some of the ones like the past year, like the wormhole. It seemed like they basically just kind of discovered a vulnerability. Basically, it seems like what they were doing is it was kind of just a bridge, and they figured a way to mint more than they were supposed to. Can you talk a little bit on that? That's some of the security behind it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think with a lot of these bridge hacks, I mean, they follow like a very common theme, right? So the Ronin hack, for example, it was very, it was like the hack wasn't very sophisticated, but you look at it as, some guy was able to. So they essentially had 9 validators. They did use the multi-sig wallet for these funds. They had 9 validators. Each one of them was supposed to have a private key, and then they validated the transaction. 5 out of 9 had to approve. And what essentially happened, the kind of the sequence of events, Sky Mavis, which is kind of the holding company, they had access to 4 of these private keys, still left on their servers. They never deleted them. And what happened was this person was able to get into these servers through a free RPC node, get those 4 private keys, and then they found an additional one through some other method. So they ended up getting the 5 private keys, and then that's how they were able to access the funds at the bridge. And in turn, $650 million or something within that amount got hacked, and those funds were extracted, and then they used a series of mixers and different ways to launder money, including sending them and bridging them over to different chains, and then using Tornado Cash. And I think there was over like 12,000 transactions that occurred after the fact. So these guys are pretty sophisticated in terms of the way that they actually hacked the Ronin chain. And you can see like the level of sophistication just by the way that the funds moved after the hack. With the Solana trade, it was a little bit less sophisticated, but it was sophisticated because they basically were able to kind of send a malicious message that that specified, okay, so 120,000 wrapped ETH to be minted. And they basically invoked the function, like the complete wrap function. And it was a malicious message, which I'm not exactly sure of the details of how they were able to craft that message, but that allowed them to mint all of this money. And what's interesting is, till this day, those funds are still in 2 wallets. And I think that's, from a criminal's perspective, probably a smart thing to do, to kind of let the heat cool off. And maybe in a few years, there's maybe more sophisticated ways to launder your money. But at the end of the day, I don't know, because there's also a bunch of other firms that are tracking these wallets, including Chainalysis and other cybersecurity firms that immediately when the funds start moving, you have Twitter bots that start tweeting about this stuff, including today. Again, the Alameda wallets, there was about $1.7 million of transactions and movements happening within those wallets. So I don't know if Sam has has some money issues because he's going to court, but that exactly. So there may be some of that going on.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
I mean, exactly. Where do you get the two? I mean, like the 250 million for bail. I mean, you don't have to use the full 250 million. It's usually 10% of that, but still, regardless of the fact, like my friend, you have $5 billion of customer funds missing, but $25 million for bail. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll definitely get into some of those hot takes in a second. But I'm curious, what about some of like the wormhole bridge hack? Because that seemed like they weren't really minting as much as they were more, from what I understood, they were more just found a vulnerability in the protocol and they switched the exchange rate essentially to get more than they were supposed to.
So I mean, correct. I mean, there was definitely a vulnerability in the protocol, but from my understanding at the time that it happened, they did mint that wrapped ETH. There was ETH locked up on one side, and then they minted that wrapped ETH on the other side. But again, they also had on the other side, so the wrapped ETH that stayed on the Solana network, which which right now is also undergoing some trouble. But the exploiter, they were able to bridge back the 10,000 ETH to the Ethereum chain. So now there is still $10 million sitting in the same wallet on Ethereum versus there's only $10 million on the Solana chain.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
On the consumer side of things, what's sort of the response when a big hack like this happens, right? So $400 million is missing. With Ethereum, when they made the switch to like Ethereum Classic and created a whole new chain, like how does that sort of fall into place, and what does that have to do and sort of manipulate the market in that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a consumer standpoint, I think definitely like be aware, because especially when thinking about the future, as the UX improves of cryptocurrency, I think that's one of the main challenges of consumers onboarding onto the crypto space, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the things that kind of we're doing at FlickPlay and we're doing at PIA to ensure kind of that like UX compatibility and make sure that regular consumers can onboard into the crypto space. But I think as we go into a multi-chain future, bridges are going to start to be more compatible and easier to use. And what I mean by that is you're not going to have to go onto a site where, okay, this is the wormhole bridge your assets ETH to Solana, and like there's all this confusion, right? Like even myself, who's been in the crypto space for quite a while, like you have to go and bridge your assets from, and this was when we had crypto on Chronos. I was trying to bridge my assets from Chronos to back to ETH, and I had to bridge like four different bridges. I'm like, this is insanity. I'm gonna lose my mind. Bridging over to crypto.com, my funds get locked up over there. Then from there to BNB. Like for a regular user, they would lose their minds, right? So I think from a consumer standpoint, when hacks like this happen, I mean, you have to realize kind of like what you're participating in. These bridges aren't, they're not hack proof. And Vitalik talked about this. Like the biggest problem we have in our industry is, or one of the biggest problems that we have in our industry is these vulnerabilities with bridges, because they're not native bridges, right? There's one chain that I forget the name of it. There's one chain that used an interesting mechanism to natively bridge across chains. And if I remember it, I'll call it out. But Vitalik mentioned that this is going to be an ongoing problem until we really figure out cybersecurity at the core level. And I think this is something where AI is going to have a big contribution, because a lot of these smart contracts that were exploited, they were audited, right? I mean, you're talking about Wormhole, which was, this was Solana's bridge. This was one of the biggest protocols in, the crypto space. That was audited. The Nomad bridge was audited. That was hacked. Ronin was audited, but that, the private keys were hacked in that case. But, at the end of the day, I think things like AI and things that have live monitoring of these smart contracts are things that they're gonna help reduce the amount of funds that can be stolen, as well as people and companies that are working with regulators and working with other crypto companies to ensure if there is stuff that's being hacked, that those funds can get stopped in the process. But again, kind of goes against the whole decentralized nature of things. However, I think it's still important that we're thinking about this industry as a whole, and when things like this happen, you can't just let $600 million of funds go into oblivion and go to Lazarus Group.
Well, one way, like it seems like there's some similarities between, I think, crypto and I guess some of your traditional fiat currencies in the sense like when you're transferring from one account to another, you're essentially just debiting and crediting the Federal Reserve or on the individual bank if it's staying in the same bank. Whereas in crypto, it's basically just happening on a ledger where it's all still, everyone can see everything. It should be easy to track until like things like Tornado Cash came around. Because it seems like they followed a very similar process as someone who's laundering like traditional fiat currency. Is they usually swap out of the initial currency that the initial crypto that they're in or initial currency that they're in into something so they escape the immediate jurisdiction which slows the response times. And then they go to something like Tornado Cash where they mix in with a bunch of, I don't know how much money's clean in Tornado Cash, but they mix with a bunch of other currency.
Like over $8 billion, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah. So what's your take on Tornado Cash? Was it founded just simply to launder money, or maybe for more privacy? Do you see that as a threat in some ways, as a threat to the cryptocurrency industry as a whole?
So I definitely don't see that as a threat. I mean, I think from my understanding, Alexei, who was one of the developers that worked on Tornado Cash, and I don't think he was the only one that developed the protocol, right? And this is one of the things that is really really talked about and argued in this industry is, can you even sanction a protocol, a decentralized smart contract, right? Does it make sense to sanction a decentralized smart protocol? And why does a developer of this smart contract, why is he liable for that when this is fully open source, right? So, I mean, this was initially created, again, from my understanding, for privacy reasons, using zero knowledge proofs, and people used it to launder funds. Now, was that the intended use case? I think from a regulator's perspective, that has to be proven that was the intended use case from Alexei's perspective in order to indict him. And I don't know I believe he's still in jail. It's been 3 months. And I think they're trying to charge him on money laundering charges. However, I don't know how that's going to hold up because we've never seen a case like this before.
What country is he in? Was he extradited to the U.S. or did they catch him in the U.S.?
No, he was in Europe. I believe it was in Norway. It was in Norway. No, so it was in Norway or Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Do you see, because you kind of mentioned a little bit about sanctioning crypto, which it seems like crypto to some degree, there's been speculation, maybe it's happening, we just don't know, of a lot of countries. Obviously, North Korea is stealing crypto to fund their nuclear program and stuff, but other countries like Russia, there's speculation that they would potentially use crypto to go around sanctions. Do you see that as potentially happening, or do you think that's kind of far-fetched?
Yes, that's absolutely happening. I know that for a fact. And I mean, it's a lot easier to avoid sanctions just for the fact that these German banks that initially that provided all of the kind of like wire transfers for grain, for oil, for stuff like that to Russia, they just stopped taking payments. And with a lot of it, like I agree with, but also there's a lot of private companies that have nothing to do with Putin or any of that nonsense, right? Any of that dictatorship. There's just like honest businessmen trying to do honest business. But at the end of the day, that's the reality. But absolutely, they're using crypto to bypass these regulations. But they're also not just using crypto, right? Like right now, I think we're in an interesting phase where unfortunately there's a war between Ukraine and Russia, and Russia is sanctioned all over the place. However, you're still seeing a massive amount of exports from Russia to China and to India. And there's different agreements in place now, right? Now they're not using the US dollars to pay for their oil and for their gas and for their steel. Now they're paying with Yuan, they're paying with rubles, they're paying with rupees. And Tehran is facilitating the rupee transactions. Russia and China have agreements that, China provides, China helps with the manufacturing of certain strategic weapons and military equipment, and Russia provides them discounted oil, like stuff like this, where you have these agreements between countries, and Russia said that they're gonna be accepting crypto for their oil, through Bitcoin, as well as through other cryptocurrencies. And if I were them, and if I was Putin, which luckily I'm not, and thankful I'm not, I would say, pay us in Monero, pay us in Zcash, right? Because those funds are actually untraceable. So if governments can get access to that, and to a lot of that money, then that would be a much more difficult thing to trace, rather than Bitcoin transactions.
Interesting. Yeah. So that brings up a point. So at what point do you think that cryptocurrency will start becoming fully adopted? Obviously, you can't predict the future. At what point do you think it's going to become stabilized to where it's like at its full adoption? Because it seems like right now it's so volatile, it'd be hard to use it to like transact, at least on everyday business.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think in the United States it is a luxury, versus in other countries it's more of a necessity. And this is kind of where the real adoption is going to come into play. And right now, if we're just looking at the numbers, I mean, we have 300 million cryptocurrency users in the world, and this kind of has like a similar, I guess, a similar analogy to the internet, right? You have 300 million users. There's 7 billion people in the world, and we only have 1.3 billion people in just China, and China is rolling out, and already rolled out, crypto yuan. So where is that going to be in 1 or 2 years? I mean, I speak to all of my Chinese friends, like they don't even have cash anymore in China. Like they're so far advanced from the United States that it's absolutely insane. They use WeChat for basically for everything, for any kind of transaction, for messages, for purchases. You don't have to go and ever use cash ever again. It's all integrated with your banks, and becomes a very neat system. Obviously, from China's perspective, it becomes a system to track all of this stuff, and to track your people, which isn't obviously an ideal use case for crypto. But for countries like Venezuela, where inflation is through the roof, and even countries like Belarus, where I'm from, it's been it is a actual use case that really helps the livelihood of citizens, because when you can't even rely on your own currency to that you're storing under your bed, or whatever you're doing to actually feed your family, then what is the means to life? Like you have to survive. So I think Bitcoin does provide that, and cryptocurrency provides that. I think, like, even in El Salvador's situation, like, yeah, they've taken a massive hit in the past year. I don't think they made a mistake by making Bitcoin a legal tender. I think we'll see that play out in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think the Central Republic of Africa, they made their legal tender, I believe, in the last year, or the last year and a half. I'm also interested to see how that plays out. But right now, everybody's calling him an idiot, right? But at the end of the day, when 5 or 10 years from now, there's 1.5 billion people using crypto, I think it's going to be a totally different use case. And I think there's going to be a massive investments in El Salvador because of that reason. And yeah, I mean, I think my honest prediction, and I don't like making predictions about cryptocurrency price. Like whenever I hear about somebody saying, "Oh, it's going to be 100K Bitcoin in 2 years," I'm like, dude, like, come on, wake yourself up. Like, don't speculate on prices of crypto. Speculate on the adoption, because that's really going to drive the price. And just looking at kind of the numbers over the past several years, I think cryptocurrency should be in the range of maybe 500 million users to 600 million users by the end of 2024. And that's just looking at China, that's just looking at India, and that's looking at South America and some of these countries. And we're far from being the top adopter of cryptocurrency. And the top adopters right now are Nigeria, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines. We're like number 8 in that stack. So I think we have a long way to go. But again, for us, it's a luxury. But I'll give you another example. For me, it's much easier to use crypto than to use a bank, because for me, like all of my employees have been based out of, or not all of them, but a lot of them, especially on the engineering side, they've been based out of Eastern Europe. And obviously, with what's going on in Eastern Europe, whether you're in Ukraine, whether you're in Belarus, whether you're in Russia, and I had employees all over the place, it's impossible to send any kind of transactions over there. So all of the payments, and even to United States employees, they pay them in crypto just because it's easier. It takes me 2 seconds versus I have to go and make a wire transfer. I don't know when it's going to get there. Chase is going to call me. They're going to say, oh, you need to provide paperwork. I'm like, guys, I've been operating this business for like 3 years. How are you guys calling me and making me a transaction? And I canceled my accounts at Chase because I'm like so tired of it. I went to Wells Fargo. I mean, I still have to have banks. I wish I could just operate on crypto, but I went to Wells Fargo and I opened up a bank there. I'm like, look, do you guys block transactions for no reason? They're like, no, like we don't block transactions for no reason, especially if you're a legitimate business, which in my case I am.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I don't think many people think about the users that are operating in a country where the governments aren't very trustworthy. But I think that's also kind of ironic as far as the China use case, because crypto was kind of formed, I think, kind of this libertarian, I guess, vision. And then you see countries like China, where it's almost like what they're doing is almost dystopian. I know the Fed had also looked into something similar to that, which I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say that the Fed is extremely untrustworthy. I mean, I think they're obviously printing more and more dollars, which isn't good for you if you're going to hold dollars. I know we're going to get into hot takes a little later, but what's your hot take on kind of what China doing and the Fed kind of experimenting with potentially making their own coin? Do you think that's just so they can turn it off, or do you think it's just what easier to control?
So I think with the I think with the United States Fed, I think we're far away from a CBDC. I think it's being discussed in the government and how to properly implement it. But again, I don't think I think we're going to have a CBDC and cryptocurrencies because we're an open society and we're an open government. If they were to outlaw all cryptocurrencies and crypto protocols, I mean, look, we at the end of the day, we're a free country and we're going to go protest and we're going to say like, no, this is not going to work, right? We're China, and they just had some protests that you haven't seen before since the Tiananmen Square or Tiananmen Square. Which was like in 1986, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But these protests kind of led to the unlock of China from their COVID policies. So I think with the Fed releasing the CBDC, I think it might be good for the economy. But again, at the end of the day, like with the things that you've been seeing the past few years, like all of the printing of money, it's not too far-fetched to say that we might be in a position where inflation is so insane that the dollar is worth nothing in maybe 10 to 15 years. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we have some pretty logical people in like entrepreneurs and hopefully some of the old politicians that that have no idea what they're doing in business and politics, and they shouldn't even be there in the first place because they're all 80 years old and they lived in a time where that our grandparents grew up in. If my grandpa managed the government, I'd be scared as shit, right? So I think I think we just need the new generations to come on, and I think we'll start really start thinking more from an entrepreneurial perspective, as well as how can we grow our economy. And we're at the end of the day, we're a capitalist society, right? That's why I moved here. That's why so many immigrants moved here, and I'm proud to be a United States citizen because, like, looking at inflation in Belarus, for example, and I grew up during this time where we had 1,000 Belarusian rubles equaled $1, and it spiked to 20,000 Belarusian rubles equaled $1, and that was within like an 8-year period. And then they basically removed the zeros. They released a new currency, which was then 2 rubles to $1. And now it's still going up. So now it's like 3 rubles to $1. But it's like it's a never-ending cycle. And cryptocurrency provides some kind of safety net in the case of a potential blow-up of the government. And we're seeing that safety net happening in Venezuela, in the South American countries where inflation has been through the roof, like Germany was back in 1930s.
It's interesting. Do you think there's going to be an increase of consumers buying larger things with it, like real estate, cars, houses, and potentially even businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've already been seeing some of that. But I think, to be honest, I think something like Bitcoin, I mean, it's considered Bitcoin gold, right? So I think more or less people are going to use it as an asset that they're holding on to. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of the collateralization of Bitcoin in order to get like DAI, for example, or get some kind of stable coin so that you can pay for these assets in cryptocurrency. Because I don't think when I talk to people, and there's kind of like two sides to this. When you talk to cryptocurrency investors, they don't want to sell off a bunch of their cryptocurrency unless they've made a bunch of money on it. Now, if they're true believers, especially when it comes to Bitcoin or Ethereum, they want to keep that as long as possible, and that's why I think like they're probably going to swap it out for collateral, or if it's at a peak, they might sell it then, and then pay for the real estate with that money. So I do think that we're going to start seeing an increase of that. However, it's obviously drastically slowed down in the past year. But in Miami, for example, there was a bunch of like kids. Like I know a guy who had $1 billion that he made basically because he was earning Bitcoin from playing games like back in like I don't know 2012, and he just had a massive amount of Bitcoin and became a billionaire because of that. And he was buying a bunch of cars, properties, and they all accepted Bitcoin. They didn't care. And Miami and Florida is a very open society, and they even created Miami Coin, which like right now I don't think it's really being used widely, but yeah, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, especially as we start the adoption of cryptocurrency for a bunch of different services online, and that becomes like a main central payment processor, not just the Visas and the Amexes of the world.
Interesting. Yeah, so let's jump into some of the use cases, some of the cryptos and protocols, as well as some of the use cases that you're bullish on. I know one of my friends asked specifically about, like, have you ever done a real estate transaction? There's a lot of hurdles to jump through, which the title company. Yes, by putting that in the blockchain. But I'm curious, can you give us a little bit kind of some of the use cases and some of the protocols that you're bullish on?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there is definitely like, so I guess let's start with NFTs, and then I'll get to protocols. So from an NFT perspective, I think there's a few. I think there's definitely like a lot of interesting use cases, and I'm kind of glad that this bubble happened and then it blew up. I think bearish markets are very healthy for new industries like this, because it really takes all of the nonsense and all of the people that just are trying to make a buck out of the industry, and it leaves all the real builders who are trying to make an impact and are trying to leverage this industry to build new cool technology that'll help advance human civilization, and or make things easier, make life easier, and make things a little bit more equitable around the world. So if we take a look at NFTs, I mean, NFTs are like they can really provide a bunch of opportunities from people that that own real estate. Now there's obviously a few, like as you mentioned, there's a few hurdles to jump when it comes to like selling a real estate property, including like the transfer of title and all of the other kind of legal nuances. However, there are platforms that are facilitating all of that now. And you can list a piece of your real estate or the entire property on a platform, and you can sell it as an NFT. Now, can you do that without the NFT being there? Potentially, but I think the NFT gives you, a valuable representation that's on the blockchain rather than it being in a centralized system. And I think that, that's really the kind of the enticing part of it is there's no way to really manipulate it. And like we see like the Zillows of the world. Yeah, they do like tracking of the assets, but I think it would just be a lot more visible. Like, how does Zillow actually track all of that information, right? If we're using public ledgers, it becomes more transparent for consumers that are buying real estate on where that real estate was, all of the different nuances about that piece of real estate, where there are termites in the walls, where there's something else in the walls, and all of that stuff can be logged on on the ledger. Now, in terms of some of the other use cases, like we can talk about musicians and artists. I mean, I think that's the most obvious, and that's what it's been used for. But an artist had a massive advantage. Now you can create art or create music, and you can sell it without really being on a centralized platform. However, there's a caveat with that. Obviously, there's a problem with distribution, which I think artists have to think about. If you want to really be, a big artist, you have to have some kind of level of distribution and marketing with your music. And I don't think we've solved that challenge yet. There's a few platforms out there like Sound XYZ, but it's not going to beat the Apple Musics and the Spotifys of the world. However, if you gain enough traction as an artist, you can still make a good amount of money from royalties and from selling your music directly. And I think we're eliminating a lot of the middlemen that really don't add a lot of value and try to manipulate legal contracts with these, with these artists and musicians in order to kind of get get more money out of the deal and kind of screw over these people that are not legal professionals or maybe didn't get the correct legal advice. Besides that, it's some of the more, I think, more use cases that I think are interesting to me is one that we're working on primarily is sports memorabilia. Sports memorabilia as well as clothing. There are massive black markets within this space. For example, Louis Vuitton, right? You see a massive influx of fake Louis Vuitton bags from China, but some of these Louis Vuitton bags, they're basically one-to-one. They're actually created by specialized designers that you can go find in China, and they're really high quality. But at the end of the day, it's not a Louis Vuitton bag made by Louis Vuitton. And Louis Vuitton released a statement that they're going to be releasing all of their merchandise with NFTs, so that you can actually prove that authenticity with that NFT. And the same thing we're doing with sports memorabilia. So now we only do first-party witness authentication. So whenever we have players signing, whether it's the Cowboys team, whether it's some other team, we videotape the players signing the actual item, and then we sticker that item with a QR code, and then we create a NFT of that person. It's basically a digital collectible card of the actual player signing the actual item. So when somebody gets that sports memorabilia, and at the end of the day, sports memorabilia is an experience, right? It's not a product that you're like, oh, well, I got it, like, great, like I can wear it. Like you can wear it, but really it's an experience that makes you happy, or you gift to someone, and you can tell a story about it. So we really wanted to make it a better experience in general. So now when you receive a sports memorabilia item that was authenticated by PIA, you can scan that QR code, you'll get taken to our platform, and it'll show you that this item is an authentic product, and it will be that digital collectible of the person signing the actual item. And we created a system called a shadow wallet, which doesn't require you to go and create a MetaMask or a Coinbase wallet and to transfer a bunch of funds. All you have to do, and we pay for all the gas fees, all you have to do is create an account with just your email and password, and you can say claim my NFT, and then your NFT is basically in your account. Now, when you're ready to transfer that out of our account into kind of your actual decentralized cryptocurrency account, you're going to have to go through the steps, which we educate you on, and how to create a wallet and how to do that. But it's becoming a lot more simple to do that from a UX perspective, due to companies like Web3 Auth, for example. They basically built a system for you to link your Facebook account and or Google account, and you basically sign in through Google, and you'll get a wallet address that's assigned to that Google account for that platform. So immediately you can say, okay, export that private key, I can import it into MetaMask. So it eliminates that whole process of me creating my MetaMask account, saving 12 keywords, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a massive step for the industry. And platforms like this are really going to change the fundamental aspects of how we onboard regular Web2 consumers, or regular consumers in general, into the Web3 space.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different things to unpack there. I think that's one interesting point is, like, if you think about like title to, like you mentioned, like real estate or really any different asset, it really is non-fungible. But I think that's also is an interesting point, because I think what most people's criticism right now of NFTs is, like, if you took that iconic tweet of that guy his NFT got stolen, and then someone's like, we need to delete the picture off your Twitter account. I think it brings to the point that there's not really any enforcement. And so it sounds like, from what you're saying, the authentication aspect's already there, and then you're kind of taking the enforcement and authorization aspect to it, trying to add that in.
Exactly. I mean, we're really not trying to, like, the way that we think of NFTs is like, look, don't try to change consumer behavior. Consumers, like, just from a psychological perspective, anytime that you even add a new feature in your application, you change the UI, UX, people complain about it because they're used to that thing working like that, right? Even if it's much better. And you'll see that all across the platforms. Like, if Instagram introduces a new feature, the first week they're complaining. Actually, the best example would be Facebook when they introduced the feed. It was massive chaos. Everybody was complaining. Facebook was seeing the data, and it's like, holy shit, this is being used way more than any other feature, and people are addicted to this stuff, right? And I think that happens just from a psychological perspective, that like people don't want to change their behavior. So I think the best thing for the crypto industry to do is, how do we make one better applications that are in Web 2, which I don't think we've done yet. I think we have still to figure out, what are the applications and the use cases that are, and how are they going to be better than Web 2? Just from a fundamental perspective, it's a better UI, it's a better UX, it works better. All of those things will really drive the adoption of Web3.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think like some of the other like really important use cases for NFTs, because I think there's so many people that really disdain the word NFT, especially after this year, because 99% of the projects failed, and everybody basically lost all their money in it. And that, when I was buying NFTs, like I knew that most likely I'm gonna lose my money on this. However, I was just buying it just to kind of learn the markets, learn what they're doing, and kind of seeing what was going on in the NFT space. However, the one NFTs that I was confident on are ENS domains, and I was buying ENS domains before I was buying a lot of the other NFTs. And ENS domains, luckily, they were here to stay, and they kind of like blew up like 4 months ago. They launched their ENS token and everybody got airdrops. Like I had friends who had like $30,000 in airdrops. I think I had like $10,000 in airdrops just because I was using that protocol. But I think ENS domains are super interesting because not only can you host your website on there, but it's all of the things that like a regular website could do, but it has to have all of these add-ons, right? With ENS domain, you can host your website on there. You can have different wallets linked, Bitcoin, Ethereum from different chains, and you can have and you can send payments directly to it. So it's like, it's an all-in-one package that makes it a lot easier to use than the traditional website. And some of the other use cases are, like education and diplomas. I think education is such an important factor in our society that, when somebody says, oh, like I have a certificate with, this and this company, like from Udemy, like great, but like what does that really tell me? Like, okay, I can go on Udemy and see that you got the certificate. Fantastic. But how much better would it be if there was some kind of consortium, maybe a DAO, that really validated these NFTs, and made sure that people who have a diploma, because you can fake diplomas nowadays. It's not that hard. And like I have stories of my friends faking diplomas in order to go into like pristine universities. It's kind of absurd and it's kind of crazy, but even universities are starting to adopt this technology so that this fraud can be eliminated. And from like a job markets perspective, I would want to see somebody that has a resume with some kind of information on the blockchain, whether it's references, whether it's their certificates, and their actual knowledge. And I don't care much about certificates. I want to understand that person in detail and understand, like, does he actually have experience in what he's doing, just from an entrepreneur's perspective and from a business perspective. And I think education is great, but at the end of the day, what matters is kind of like the practical ability to do things, and being able to be a specialist and a generalist in your area. But that's just kind of my outlook on it. But I want to see some things that are really like that I can validate myself, rather than having to go and to search all of and do like conduct basically an intelligence analysis. Like I'm not here to be an OPSEC guy and to go and dig through the internet and do cybersecurity analysis to make sure that guy is not a vigilante.
Interesting. So how do you see OpenAI platform? It seems like it's going to have a huge effect pretty soon. So how do you see AI affecting crypto? And when bots take over and cut humans out, like start using crypto to transact?
I mean, look. I think there's a lot of good in AI. I think it gets like there's obviously a lot of dangers of AI, and after seeing like ChatGPT, I think like absolutely amazing technology. And I think it's there's a lot of people that are talking about it, and they're scared, and they're like, oh, like our students can basically create these essays, and these essays are basically created from scratch, so there's nothing to verify them against to see if it was copyright or not. But I think some stuff like that is going to really make the markets more efficient, and people can actually focus on the bigger picture rather than sitting there writing in like a use case. Instead of sitting there and writing an article, now you can do the proper investigation and have the AI write that article. In terms of like smart contracts and crypto, I think it'll make crypto, it'll make the efficiency of the crypto markets a lot higher, just because of all of the arbitrage opportunities and all of the different markets that are available. I think that's what AI and machine learning is going to be used for. In addition to that, I think it's going to be extremely important that AI has a high role in security of smart contracts, because a lot of the smart contracts that are currently built, they're based on mathematics. If you're trying to optimize, your smart contract for efficiency, you're really looking at, every single function, how much memory is it taking and all this, just so that you can understand, okay, this is how much gas is going to use at the end of the day. And this was actually extremely important 6 months ago, or no, even more than that. I think it was like roughly a year ago when we were building out smart contracts, because to launch one smart contract, it cost us $4,000. Like it would be absolutely absurd. So for us, it was absolutely critical that we sat there and we analyzed and we optimized the smart contract for efficiency. And there were times where we launched the smart contract and we had to relaunch it again because we realized there was a mistake. And it was like, oh, there was $8,000 out the door. Like, I mean, but what can we do? We're not going to launch a smart contract with vulnerabilities. So I think AI is going to play a crucial role. And I'm going to give a clap to Certic and Certic and Consensus. Certic is definitely using AI for smart contract monitoring and protocol monitoring to make sure that if there's any kind of exploits, if there's any kind of strange activity going on with a smart contract, that they are reporting that, and they give different scores on smart contracts in order to kind of ensure the confidence for the consumer that this smart contract was not only audited, but it has less potential vulnerabilities than a traditional smart contract. That's why one thing that I would say to cryptocurrency and protocol builders is don't cheap out on smart contract audits. I think it's extremely important that, like, if you can find probably a smart contract auditor for $3,000. But again, if you do that and your smart contract gets exploited, your entire reputation is ruined overnight. And all that hard work that you put in, and it's going to be lost. And not only are you going to lose money, but you're going to just lose your entire reputation. And why do that if you're really trying to make something big, and you're trying to make some actual positive changes in the world.
Yeah, interesting. So let's jump in a little bit to your hot takes. What's your hot take on the collapse of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yeah, SBF. I mean, I think just like point blank. I mean, he's a fraudster, and I think he is a very smart fraudster. I think all of this nonsense of him going out publicly and talking to all these interviewers and saying, "Oh, he didn't have the proper risk mitigation protocols, or he didn't know what was going on," is just a bunch of bullshit, to be honest. I mean, there's it's clear that he knew exactly what was going on, and he knew where the funds were being funneled to, and he admitted to fraud himself, kind of unknowingly. I was actually in one of there was a few great people that were doing AMAs, and look, hand clap for Twitter for having the Twitter Spaces, because I think there was the best real-time reporting on critical news like this, way better than the Foxes, the CNNs, and all this left and right-wing media. I think we're having better news reporting on a social media platform than we ever did from any of these news outlets. But CoffeeZilla, I heard him several times on an AMA, and one of the things that he asked, and very intelligently, because he asked several questions the first time and it didn't work, because he kept on saying that the funds that users deposited, there was this margin lending side of the accounts. And again, this is a very deep story, so I'm going to kind of try to cover cover the main points. But he kept saying that the excuse was, there was this margin lending side, and according to the terms of service, according to the FTX terms of service, the customers that just deposit into FTX, not margin lending, their customers or their funds would not be used for any kind of margin lending, and those funds would not be used as part of like Alameda's funding and lending protocols and trading, etc. So theoretically, those funds should be secure and they should be still present for users to withdraw. And the fact of the matter is, when CoffeeZilla asked them, when all of these withdrawals started taking place, why did the people that, were just holding assets in FTX, why didn't they get precedent? Because it was just funds deposited. And Sam Bankman-Fried admitted himself that they were basically commingled, that it was up for grabs. Whoever came first got their funds. So there was no differentiation between regular consumers who deposited funds into FTX versus consumers that deposited into the margin lending accounts. There was a bunch of other things that were going on with Alameda and all of their different investments and money spent. Look, there was so many red flags in this space that even Brian Armstrong and Elon Musk commented like, look, where do you have $2 billion of cash lying around for an investment in Twitter? Where it was $1 billion. Like, red flags raised. Same thing with Brian Armstrong. Like this guy was spending money out the ass everywhere, for the FTX arena, for different sponsorships, all of that. And just the numbers didn't line up. But I think that was the biggest flag, that he admitted that these funds were commingled. And I think that's just like the simplest way to put it, that right there he committed fraud. But on top of that, I think there was so much in the back that was going on, where when he was using mark-to-market accounting for the for just the calculation of the total number of assets on their balance sheet. I mean, you don't use mark-to-market accounting. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. Look, if you dump Serum today with the amount of Serum that they had, they would only gain, they would only have 25% of the value. Right? It doesn't make sense. It's not how these markets work, and he very well knows that, because he made millions and tens of millions of dollars arbitraging Bitcoin in different markets. He knows how this stuff works at a very, very deep level. So to me, it's just, it's just absolute lies. The fact that he says that he doesn't know this stuff, because he was heavily involved in Alameda and FTX, and he was involved in a bunch of the other investments. And they tried to bail out Voyager. They did bail out Voyager and BlockFi. And at the end of the day, those were terrible decisions, because they had so much bad debt on them. I don't know why they would do that. And there was more to unravel in that onion that started with the GBTC trade. The Grayscale Trust, when they first launched that, that was something that was definitely the SEC's fault, because they basically made a backdoor to kind of a lookalike ETF, where you can own GBTC and you can only redeem it for the underlying asset 6 months later. So there were companies like Genesis Capital and like DCG Group, and 3AC was kind of like one of the main one of them, where they basically because there was so much demand for GBTC, there was a premium sometimes from 10 to 35%. So they would leverage that. They would sell these shares. They would get that premium within 6 months. They're making 35%, because the underlying asset is 35% cheaper. Until one day, in basically 2 days, that premium went to a discount. And all of these companies, especially 3AC, you're talking about billions of dollars now that you are in debt, and this is like a giant hole in everybody's balance sheets at the end of the day, from 3AC and Voyager to Genesis to DCG, which I don't think DCG is going to be going under. I think they still have some, I still think they have some firepower, but Genesis Capital is definitely kind of an interesting case of what happened. And just to comment on the Gemini Earn program, they because I had actually quite a bit of friends that had money in the Gemini Earn program, and the one thing that I think they did correctly, even though I don't think it was like morally correct, is the Gemini Earn program is theoretically, or not theoretically, is technically a security, because that is in their terms of service. You're putting your money into a risky asset, and you can lose that risky asset. And it was registered as a security. So when people started, when their funds were locked up, they weren't able to withdraw them. And I had friends that had 150 grand, 250 grand in them. They couldn't withdraw them. It was technically fully legal, although it's not correct. But again, I think, at the end of the day, I think people probably will be able to withdraw those funds because you're talking about the Winklevi are, in charge of that company, and I don't think they're going to ruin their entire brand reputation for $800 million, or I believe the hole is somewhere like that big.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like with FTX, what you're saying, they just continually took on more and more risk. So they started using all these funds that they didn't really have. So in some ways, they're kind of duplicating. Like as soon as they took those funds, they were deposited and put them in all these sponsorships. If those things didn't pay out or at least get to a break even, they were going to be in a situation where they're going to be underwater and not have everyone's money if they withdrew it.
Exactly. And like they had so much money in collateral, like in FTT. Like you can't, as an exchange, you can't have your own cryptocurrency that you've issued as collateral to take on more assets. It makes zero sense, and that is so risky to do. And I think that's like one of the things that that I commend CZ for doing that, because they're not involved with any kind of that, with any business of that kind, right? And I guess we can get into Binance a little bit more later, but the fact that they had I think it was like $2 billion in collateral of FTT tokens, and they were taking loans on that collateral, and then investing in all of these different things, and these different sponsorships, and in venture investments, and were they using customers' funds for it? Probably. That's what it looks like. And when FTT collapsed, and Serum collapsed, and the entire crypto market collapsed, like theoretically, still the customers that deposited funds, they should have their money back if what he's saying is true. Now the margin lending accounts, yeah, they probably are never going to get their money back. But again, like a new story rolled out today that there's $3.5 billion seized by the Bahamas authorities from FTX. So I don't know, what will happen there. And also, FTX Japan announced that they're going to allow withdrawals starting mid-January for consumers. So I mean, we'll still kind of see how this plays out. It's a very interesting story. But at the end of the day, Sam Bankman-Fried is a complete fraudster, and he definitely knew what he was doing.
I remember too early on, they talked about that they were hacked, and they were advising people, I think on the Telegram channel, to delete the app, not take any updates. So was that just Fugazi? That never happened?
No, so I do remember that, and from what I recall, when people, or when that hack happened, and I don't know if that was internal. I don't think anybody knows if that was internal or not. But people were saying, do not update your FTX app, because there was definitely some kind of vulnerability when that happened, and that's when also I believe there was a lot of funds drained that same day. I might be mistaken on that, but yeah, I mean, like that was, I don't think that was coincidental. I think that was something that was probably insider job, but that's just speculation. But again, who knows?
Okay. Before we get into Binance and kind of how they're making out of this, what is your take on the collapse of the Terra ecosystem? That was another guy, I think, Do Kwon, who was wanted by the authorities for a while. What's your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, so first, like just to cover Terra Luna, just as a general kind of general concept. Terra Luna itself as an ecosystem was pretty interesting. I never used it. However, the whole concept of how UST worked, obviously, is a very flawed concept mathematically. I think algorithmic stablecoins in general, you can't have an algorithmic stablecoin without any reserve assets. I think we've have that proven out in the past, in the past year especially. But the way that Terra Luna works in general is essentially if UST goes up above $1, you can then burn Luna and get UST, and therefore you can have this arbitrage opportunity, and you can do vice versa. So if it goes below $1, you burn it, you get $1 worth of Luna, and then you can sell that Luna on the market and make 1 cent on the dollar. Or it goes 101, burn UST, get Luna, sell that and make profit.
So it's essentially like a hedge where they're offsetting one
Correct,
another.
exactly. And Yeah, and then in theory, by market dynamics, people are arbitrageurs are going to make that stablecoin stable. And we saw over the course of several years that it did get depegged several times. Um, but the whole thing is when you have this kind of system and you have extreme market volatility, like what happened with the Terra Luna case, there is no way at the end of the day to uphold that. Unless you have massive, massive amounts of buy pressure, which is what they were trying to do with their Bitcoin reserves through the Luna Foundation Guard. So, I mean, essentially what happened was, and this is again speculation in terms of who shorted, who did what, but there was a anonymous entity. People say it was Citadel or BlackRock. Nobody can confirm that, but it was anonymous, and they essentially deposited. It was at the time $84 million in USDC. To get $84 million in USD, they started dumping that on the Curve Pool 3. And in the same time, no, and even before that, sorry, they had a bunch of, again, speculation. They had a bunch of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin that they were shorting at the time when they were trying to basically collapse the entire crypto market. So this was a massive play, kind of like the play on the pound back in I don't know what that year was. The George Soros trade, but the $84 million, they started dumping that into the market. That was the first kind of depeg of USD. Immediately when that happened, there was a protocol called Anchor Protocol where there was over $1 billion. No, even more than that. There was I think there was several $billion of UST locked up in Anchor Protocol. Anchor Protocol was actually quite interesting, but it was a Ponzi scheme at the end of the day. Gave you basically 20% returns for risk-free assets. And there's actually a funny program that even I participated in. So there was a protocol called Abracadabra Money. And Abracadabra Money allowed you to deposit some kind of asset, and you would get magic internet money, which is a stablecoin. And they created this protocol called the Degen box. And what the Degen box essentially allowed you to do was you deposit collateral, you deposit UST, and you would go through this cycle where you can go and deposit this UST in Anchor. You would get AUST, which is the interest-bearing product. And then you can go and do that over and over again. And they only keep 15% collateral. So you would go deposit UST, get AUST back, deposit that into the protocol. They would give you more UST. You go deposit that in Anchor, and there was this cycle until you kind of like ran out of funds. So you could essentially get 156% APY just doing that, and it was risk-free because you're using a stable coin. And a lot of people were doing that, including myself. But I wasn't doing that with millions of dollars. Luckily, I was doing that, with several thousands. Because I just didn't believe that like 20% risk-free returns was going to be sustainable in the long term. Anyway, that's why there was a lot of money locked up in Anchor. And when the first depeg happened, there was also a bunch of sell pressure from on Binance of UST being sold, as well as on other exchanges. So whoever this anonymous person was, they knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew that there was going to be a bunch of people pulling out of the Anchor protocol and dumping their UST because all of this on-chain data is going to go all over the social media. So immediately when that happened, there was over $200 million of assets flowing out of Anchor protocol and being dumped on the market. And that's when it depegged entirely and went below 90 cents. And, in this continuous cycle of, you have these different buybacks, as you're buying back, or as you're burning UST, and you're buying Luna and trying to sell it for $1 of USD, which theoretically it should do, Luna was also dropping significantly. And, as it continued to go down, there was no more buy pressure on USD, which is continuous sell pressure, and just that that algorithm couldn't uphold, and that that stablecoin couldn't uphold, and it ended up going to zero. And that's really kind of the sequence of events of what happened. And do I think it was intentional? Of course not, right? I don't think Do Kwon wanted that to happen. However, do I consider Do Kwon, like a criminal? Maybe, maybe not, but I do think that he definitely, uh, and I want to be careful kind of with what I say here, but I don't think he necessarily defrauded investors. It depends on kind of like what, how you're looking at it. But I think from a risk perspective, like this is definitely a security, and you have to make sure that if you're running a protocol or any kind of company, you're transparent about the risks. And he was promoting UST and Terra all the time on Twitter, and without talking about the potential risks of the Terra Luna ecosystem. And they had some cool protocols on there, like Mirror Protocol, which I think allowed a lot of the people that weren't in the United States market to buy assets that were like stocks, for example. They were derivatives of stocks, which I think opened up a lot of opportunities for third world countries. But stuff like that, to me, like Do Kwon could have been a little bit more transparent. He could have been a little bit more honest, like, hey, look, this is cryptocurrency, this is a risky asset. And in that case, I think that's where the fine line was drawn, where he was like, we're gonna go kill Dai with UST. Obviously, who's still around? Dai USD is dead. So like that, at the end of the day, I don't think he approached that correctly.
So it sounds like there's two theories. I know the one is that there was some maliciously attacking it, which I think people have kind of generally referred to as, from what I hear, as the George Soros style attack. And then the second theory is that Do Kwon was involved in it to make profit in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was. I mean, look, I think he made a lot of money out of it, and I think what he says that, and I'm not sure if he said like he has some money left over. Like he definitely has. He's made a shit ton of money in this protocol, and look, I don't think he intentionally used the protocol in order to become a billionaire. I think that was a result of them building out a great a great ecosystem and great community, because this community, they were, I mean, I think they were like the most maxi community out of any other crypto community. Like they were supporting him hands on. Any tweet that he had, they would attack any other person that that talked bad about Terra Luna. And I think that's a pretty unhealthy environment, because when you're such a maxi that you fail to look at other people's perspectives and opinions, then look, you're just a degenerate at the end of the day, because like, there's so many different other technologies and opinions and perspectives that you really, to be a pragmatic individual, you have to kind of respect others' opinions, and you have to also look at the other side of the table, and you can't be like entrenched in your own kind of like in your own tunnel vision, because you think that something is going to be great. The same way that people got lost in NFTs, the same way people got lost in the Terra Luna ecosystem, same people that get lost in just a bunch of hype, including network marketing schemes. But that's for for a different discussion.
Yeah, I guess it generally creates starts to get to their head, and also creates some groupthink within the whole community.
Absolutely.
And then they stop thinking about some of the other risks and things that they probably shouldn't be thinking about.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about over the past year, it started to make headlines of a lot of crypto billionaires have wound up dead, different situations, which Dima's talking to us from an undisclosed location right now. Just kidding. Maybe.
You guys know where to find me.
What? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in general, it's if you're a crypto billionaire, you're a target, because at the end of the day, if you get caught, and if you get caught slipping, as they say, then you could be with your Ledger wallet, or you could get a gun to your head, and you can go to your bedroom and open up your laptop and send me a few $millions in funds. But in terms of crypto billionaires dying, look, I think there is a lot of hate for crypto billionaires in general, just because I think a lot of the people that have lost money in the crypto space, they blame it on somebody else rather than blaming it on themselves. And this is something that, I think just is inherent in human nature. I think instead of looking at the mistakes you've made as an individual, you start blaming everybody around you. And that's why a lot of people in the NFT and crypto space remain anonymous. And I totally get that. Like there were some people that I worked very closely with. They're like, I'm not going to, to dox myself in order to kind of validate my project because, I've already received life threats and I have a family, I have kids. I don't want to be undergoing that. And yeah, with the crypto billionaires dying, I mean, look, like I think there was for sure like targets on their heads, and I don't know if it was from the United States government. I don't know if it's from somebody else who knows at the end of the day. But the people that control this globe, they're a lot more powerful than we think, and it's not and it's not the presidents of the world. We're talking about some serious players, and they have way more money than even the richest people in the world. So that's some people you don't want to mess with.
Yeah, interesting. Because like some of them, I know one of them, he tweeted a couple hours before his death that the CIA and Mossad was after him. That was in Puerto Rico. He died in Puerto Rico. At least was found dead in Puerto Rico. One guy, I think, died in his sleep. And then obviously some of the Russian billionaires, anytime like a Russian billionaire dies, you just have to wonder if it's the GRU or FSB, especially kind of there's a use case kind of against a lot of those governments that maybe they don't want to give up the control that or the
Yeah.
person's threatening their control.
Yeah, and like just to speak on the Russian cases, like 100%, like I think a lot of those cases are definitely direct involvement from Putin, because like especially in a time like this, he's definitely threatened from if you are going against him and you're in your circle, like you are an actual threat because he has a very tight knit group of people that he can trust, but he has to have a tight grip on them, and there is pretty much like every large company in Russia is controlled by the government now officially, although they don't even say that. What they do is they come to that company and say, look, this company is ours now and you're going to operate it for us. And that's why I think Putin is probably one of the richest men in the world. And, nobody really knows that. It's undisclosed. But look, he built a castle for like $7 billion. And he has, if he were to launch nukes one day, hopefully not, nobody would be able to reach him because you just go into his nuke cave, and there's no nuke that's ever going to be able to penetrate him. So I think he's psychopathic enough to do it, and we wouldn't be able to find him anyways. But that's definitely one of the guys where I think all of these accidents, quote unquote, they weren't accidents, right? You die in your sleep, you fall off your balcony. Like, what are we talking about here? How does a person fall off their balcony? I mean, my cousin has fallen off the balcony being hammered once, but like to fall off a balcony, like in Egypt, I think one of like the billionaires that did it. It's like, how do you do that? You don't just fall off the balcony. It's obviously some kind of schemes involved. And from the crypto billionaires perspective, I think it's the same thing. I think they just messed with the wrong people, and I think there's still a level of mafia out there. It's just not the Italian mafia these days. It's the CIA mafia, and whoever. And I don't want to say that the CIA does these things, but in reality, all governments do. And not to speak against governments, but it's to their interest to protect the national security of the United States, right? So in some cases it's necessary, in some cases it's not. And I think that's also a very deep discussion that we can talk about for hours.
Okay, that's dark. On a lighter subject, so I think a lot of people have compared Binance to say like Chase Bank. I know during the 2008 recession, Chase Bank was very strong. They took on a couple assets that probably didn't help them, but overall they made out very well. And it seems like Binance is in a very strong position, especially they've shown a lot of confidence. Looking at, I think they actually looked originally at buying FTX before they dug a little deeper and found all the problems with it. So what's your take on Binance? Do you think that they're the strongest? Is the strongest player right now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Binance is definitely. I mean, right now, according to some reports, they have 70% of all the trading volume of crypto currently. And look, I think that's also kind of like a little bit of a dangerous situation in the crypto space because we don't want all of the trading volume to be in one exchange. But I think what's going on is very interesting with all of these collapses. I think it's very healthy in the market that people are starting to understand the dangers of keeping your money on an exchange. Now, I'm not saying that exchanges are bad actors. I think there's a use for exchanges. Like Kraken is a great example where they've had a proof of reserve system for quite a while now, where a lot of the other exchanges they started implementing proof of reserves after FTX, including a Binance, right? And Kraken has been pretty transparent with the way that they use funds. That they don't use customers' funds. I've been using Kraken for quite some time, never had any problems with them, and they also require a lot of like documentation, which I respect in a way because it shows the level of due diligence that they do. Binance, I think they will be probably the chase, and it looks like they are the chase of crypto, but especially in a market like this. It's very interesting because their business model is making money on trades essentially, right? But what also and obviously like making money, they've made a lot of money on token listings and market making and all of the above. They have a bunch of different services, including research, etc. But I think in a market like this, when there is companies that are being sold for pennies on the dollar, that's when companies become they go from $1 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion company to potentially $1 trillion company, because you can buy out engineers, you can buy out great technologies, and you can buy out a lot of the companies that add significant value to your company. I think that's exactly what they're doing and what they're going to be doing in this next year. And I think in this next year, I think 2023 is really going to be an interesting year. I think there's a lot of things to look out for, and I think Binance they're on the cusp of being not only the top player in crypto, but the top financial player in the world.
If you think about like the crypto, the whole idea is kind of decentralized, but when you start getting one player controlling 70% of it, I guess it kind of becomes an ironic problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, like if you trust exchanges and like again, like I'm really glad that and it sucks because like I lost money. There were a bunch of people who lost money. Like it's a good thing that we kind of step back for a second because now people are realizing you have to use wallets like Ledger Wallet, and you can't keep all of your money on exchanges. Which I tell all my friends, I'm like, guys, like you can't keep your money on an exchange. You can trade on an exchange, but take your money off of the exchange when you're done trading, because at the end of the day, you are the one responsible for your assets. You don't know what the company at the end of the day is going to run into. So I think a lot of the shift right now, and we're seeing a pretty good shift in what is happening on exchanges. There's been a lot of outflows of money from exchanges to private wallets like MetaMasks and hardware wallets. And I think that's a great thing because now I think DeFi protocols, they're going to play a very big role these next few years, and not the DeFi Ponzi schemes that that we've been seeing a lot of, especially in 2021 and 2022, where you're farming some kind of imaginary token, and there's just a basic inflationary asset. There's the tokenomics don't make sense, but DeFi protocols that allow you to do the same things that a centralized exchange does, but it's all through smart contracts, and you can be 100% certain that there is not going to be any front running of transactions. There's not going to be any market manipulation. There's always potential hacks and people maybe manipulating the market, but it's it's transparent that they're doing that. And Avi, who actually got arrested, I think it was like 2 days ago, for the Mango hack, he was manipulating the prices of I believe it was the Mango token, in order to over collateralize and exploit that protocol for $116 million. Now he's in jail for it because it's considered fraud. But at the end of the day, it's an exploit that he found within a protocol where where code is law essentially. So I think that's a great thing that we're getting to a place of where things are gonna be more decentralized, because humans by nature, they're you can be a bad actor, and we're driven by greed and profit. Not everybody, but there's a lot of us that are, including Sam Bankman-Fried. So I think that eliminates the kind of like the psychological misbehaviors of humans.
So what's your hot take on Coinbase? I know they've made quite a bit of headway in the cryptocurrency industry, and there's recently been panic about their terms of service, which basically stated that if they were to go bankrupt, that all of your funds, anyone's funds that are in Coinbase, would be subject to the bankruptcy proceedings. What would you tell someone who's one, hosting their crypto in a platform like that, and where would you put it? Because it seems like if you put it on your computer, it's at risk of getting hacked. There's malware that steal crypto.
Yeah, and I have high respects for Brian Armstrong. I think he is I think he is an honest person in terms of like he runs a for-profit company that's a public company, right? But at the same time, he understands and he promotes the power of decentralization. And they are investing in protocols, decentralized protocols, which kind of goes against their business model, which is interesting. But at the same time, I get why, because as we invest more as an industry in these decentralized protocols, it gives them a better rep for their brand. And they're going to have decentralized protocols that are also going to be making fees, right? Because the centralized protocols, it's not like they don't make money. I think that's just a false misconceptions that, like the protocols don't make money. They do make money. And I think that's their whole point is, as we have a shift in the technological advances, we're going to need more decentralized protocols, and Coinbase wants to be at the forefront of that. So he's been a very prominent advocate of making sure that they have a decentralized wallet, and they are making investments into decentralized protocols. But I think when that leaked, I think it was a surprise for everyone. Again, I don't think, if they went bankrupt, most likely what would happen is, look, their terms of service, like that essentially, you get taken to court. They could claim that, look, this wasn't our terms of service, and at the end of the day, not pay customers back. So for customers, yeah, I'd advise them, look, like if you're holding funds on Coinbase, and it's a lot of funds, don't hold them on Coinbase. And I'm not saying not to hold any funds on Coinbase. I'm saying if you have significant amounts of money, and if $5,000 is significant to you, then why hold it all the time on Coinbase? It doesn't make sense. Where you can hold it on a hardware wallet, and then you can move it to Coinbase to make trades. So I think it's one of those situations where, look, I don't think Coinbase would do that. But again, who knows what can happen if they do go bankrupt, and they really don't have the money, then you're not going to get it back at the end of the day. So it's just be a smart consumer, be a smart individual, and just be pragmatic about what companies can and will do when shit hits the fan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They use a hardware wallet such as Ledger, which we're promoting. But before we go, so if people want to follow you and for more insights and more information, where's the best spot to find you?
Twitter and Instagram. So it's AZAR3NKO. Again, AZAR3NKO. It's my last name. That's really kind of where I do my shit posting, and I post some stuff about some pictures of me and fam. I have a TikTok account, but I don't really post on there. I actually experimented on TikTok during COVID.
It's a Chinese spy app.
Exactly. I actually experimented on TikTok during COVID, and I got to 50,000 followers accidentally because I was playing around with the algorithm. But I don't really post on there. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting time to get onto social media and to be on great podcasts like yours. And I think you guys are doing a great job. And again, thank you guys for having me on here. I think look, with all that's going on, I think real genuine podcasts and real-time reporting, I think it's extremely valuable. So I think the work that you guys are doing is great, and it's much needed in this industry.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This was awesome. Definitely some invaluable information. Some new perspectives that I've never even thought about myself.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you guys for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you guys a happy New Year's, and 2023, let's kill it.